Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. Some background. My grandfather bought this beautiful 30-acre property back in 1952. It includes a natural spring-fed lake that takes up about 5 acres. He built the house himself, positioning it perfectly to overlook the water. I grew up swimming in that lake every summer, fishing with my dad, and learning to kayak. When my parents decided to retire to Florida, they sold me the property at a family discount, knowing how much it meant to me. Everything was peaceful until about 2 years ago when a developer bought the farm next door and built Lake Vista Estates, a fancy subdivision with homes starting at $800,000. They marketed it heavily as a lakefront community even though their property only bordered one small corner of my lake. I should have known trouble was brewing when I started seeing their promotional materials showing pictures of my lake as if it was part of their development. The problem started small at first. I'd notice people I didn't know walking along my shoreline or setting up beach chairs on my property. I put up some private property signs, which helped a little, but some folks would just ignore them. Then one Saturday morning in May, I walked out to my dock to find 3 kids I didn't know jumping off it while their parents sat nearby in lawn chairs. "Excuse me," I called out. "This is private property. You can't be here." One of the moms looked up from her phone. "Oh, don't worry about it. We live in Lake Vista. The lake is for everyone's use." I tried to stay calm. "No, ma'am, it isn't. This lake and the surrounding property have been in my family for 70 years. You're trespassing." "That's not what the HOA told us," the other parent chimed in. "They said the lake is a community amenity." I was furious. Who were they to tell people they could use my property? I immediately drafted an email to the HOA board explaining that the lake was private property and demanding they stop telling residents they could use it. Their response came from Diana Mitchell, the HOA president, and it made my blood boil. "Dear Mr. Harrison, thank you for your email. However, we must inform you that as a natural body of water adjacent to our community, the lake is considered a public resource. Our residents have the right to reasonable access and enjoyment of this amenity. Any attempts to restrict access will be met with legal action. Best regards, Diana Mitchell, Lake Vista Estates HOA President." I couldn't believe the audacity. I immediately called my lawyer, Steve Roberts, who'd handled the property transfer from my parents. "They're completely wrong," Steve assured me after reviewing the situation. "The lake is entirely on your property and has clear chain of title going back to your grandfather's purchase. I'll draft a formal cease and desist letter." But the HOA wasn't backing down. Instead, they escalated. The next weekend, I found a crew setting up a floating dock at the corner of the lake that bordered their property. I immediately called the police. When the officers arrived, Diana showed up in her Mercedes SUV, waving a stack of papers. "We have permits for this dock," she announced smugly. The officer reviewed the papers and turned to me. "Sir, they do appear to have county permits. But this is my property." I protested. "They can't just build on it without my permission." "That's a civil matter," the officer replied. "You'll need to take it up in court." Diana smirked at me. "See? Everything we're doing is perfectly legal. You might as well accept that times are changing, Mr. Harrison. This isn't your private fishing pond anymore." That's when I decided to fight fire with fire. Steve helped me file for an emergency injunction to stop the dock construction. We had a hearing scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I hired a surveying company to clearly mark my property lines and document everything. At the hearing, Diana and the HOA's lawyer tried to argue that because the lake connected to a creek that eventually fed into a river, it was technically navigable waters and thus public property. They even had some phony expert witness ready to testify about watershed management. But Steve was prepared. He presented the original property surveys from 1952, showing that the lake was entirely contained within my grandfather's purchase. He had documentation proving it was spring-fed and not connected to any navigable waterway. The creek they mentioned was actually a man-made overflow drain my grandfather had installed. The judge granted our injunction, ordering all construction to stop immediately. But Diana wasn't done. She organized an HOA meeting and told all the residents that I was trying to steal their lake access and destroy their property values. The next day, I woke up to find my dock had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "Share the Lake" across it and broken several boards. My security cameras caught 3 teenagers doing the damage, and I recognized them as kids from Lake Vista Estates. When I showed the footage to the police, they visited the parents. Instead of apologizing, the parents threatened to sue me for illegally recording their children. I added them to the growing list of people who would be named in my lawsuit. Because oh yes, there was going to be a lawsuit. Steve helped me file a comprehensive civil suit against the HOA, Diana personally, and several homeowners who had repeatedly trespassed despite warnings. We asked for damages, legal fees, and a permanent injunction against accessing my property. The HOA tried to fight it, but their case fell apart when we subpoenaed their marketing materials and board meeting minutes. It turned out they had knowingly used photos of my lake in their promotional materials without permission, and there were emails proving they knew it was private property but decided to claim it as public anyway. The smoking gun was an email from Diana to the board that said, "Who cares if it's technically his property? Once enough people are using it, he won't be able to stop us. It's easier to ask forgiveness than permission." When that email was presented in court, Diana's face turned white. The judge was not amused by their attempts to essentially steal my property through adverse possession. But I wasn't done yet. While the lawsuit was pending, I took action to protect my property. I hired a company to install an 8-foot security fence along my entire property line with Lake Vista Estates. It was expensive, but worth every penny to see Diana's face when the crew started work. She came flying out of her house, waving her arms. "You can't put up that monstrosity. It violates our HOA architectural guidelines." I smiled sweetly. "I'm not in your HOA, remember? I can build whatever fence I want on my property. You might want to check the setback requirements though. Your precious dock is going to need to be removed since it's on my side of the property line." "We'll see about that," she sputtered, pulling out her phone presumably to call their lawyer. "Yes, we will," I replied calmly. "In court. Now please get off my property before I add another trespassing incident to my documentation." The lawsuit dragged on for 6 months, but the outcome was worth the wait. The judge ruled entirely in my favor. The HOA and named homeowners were permanently barred from accessing my property. They had to pay damages for the dock construction and vandalism. They were ordered to remove all photos and references to the lake from their marketing materials. Diana was personally liable for a portion of the damages due to her willful and malicious actions in encouraging trespassing. They had to pay all my legal fees. The total came to just over $150,000. Diana resigned from the HOA board the next day. But the best part? The judge specifically mentioned in his ruling that I had the right to maintain my security fence and ordered the HOA not to interfere with it. I may have taken some satisfaction in painting it a bright blue color that I know Diana hates. These days, I enjoy my lake in peace. The fence keeps out unwanted visitors, and the new HOA board, Diana moved away after the judgment, is much more respectful of property rights. I even caught them specifically warning new residents that the lake is private property and trespassing will result in prosecution. I did hear through the grapevine that Diana tried to move to another lakefront community across town, but they rejected her HOA board application after Googling her name and finding news coverage of our lawsuit. Karma has a way of working things out. Some of the reasonable neighbors have apologized, saying they really didn't know the lake wasn't public property. I've invited a few of them to come fishing with me properly, as guests. It's nice to share sometimes, when it's my choice to do so. My grandfather would be proud that I protected his legacy. The lake remains private, peaceful, and exactly as it should be, a place for quiet enjoyment, not a community water park. As for the HOA, they've installed a fancy community pool, which is what they should have done in the first place instead of trying to steal my property. I hear Diana's old house has a perfect view of it from the back deck. Too bad she's not around to enjoy it. The fence stands as a reminder that sometimes you have to stand up to entitled people who think they can take what isn't theirs. And that blue paint still looks as bright as ever, especially when the sun reflects off the lake. Update. It's been 6 months since my last post, and a lot has happened that I thought you all might find interesting. Turns out karma wasn't done with Diana and the HOA just yet. Remember those marketing materials that falsely advertised my lake as part of their community? Well, that came back to bite them in a big way. A group of homeowners who bought during the initial development phase filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA and the development company for false advertising. They argued that they paid premium prices for homes based on promised lake access that didn't actually exist. I got subpoenaed to testify in their case, which was actually kind of satisfying. I brought all my documentation showing how the HOA knew from the start that the lake was private but advertised it anyway. The developers tried to blame everything on Diana and the HOA board, but those emails we uncovered in my case proved they were in on it too. The class action settled last month for over $2 million. Every homeowner who bought during the first phase of development got a significant payout. The development company also had to reduce the prices on their remaining lots since they couldn't advertise them as lakefront property anymore. Diana's story got even better. Remember how I mentioned she moved away? Well, she tried to buy a house in the reserve at Crystal Lake across town, but they rejected her application after Googling her name. Turns out that wasn't the end of it. A friend who works in real estate told me she's been blacklisted by pretty much every HOA community in the county. Her reputation for causing legal troubles has made her radioactive. I heard through the grapevine that she ended up having to buy a regular house in a non-HOA neighborhood. The irony is delicious. The new HOA board has been much better to deal with. The president, Tom Wilson, actually came over to apologize in person for his predecessor's behavior. We had a good conversation about property rights and being good neighbors. "I want you to know we've completely revised our community guidelines," Tom told me. "We've added specific language about respecting neighboring private property and clarified that the lake is not a community amenity." I appreciated his directness. "That's good to hear. I never wanted bad blood with my neighbors." "Most of us get that now," he said. "Those of us who've been here a while were pretty embarrassed by how Diana handled everything. We're trying to rebuild our community's reputation." The HOA has completed their new community pool, and I have to admit, they did a nice job. They even named it Vista Pool instead of trying to include lake in the name. It's funny, now that they have their own amenity, nobody seems too bothered about not having lake access. Some good things have come from all this too. I've gotten to know several of my neighbors better, the ones who weren't involved in all the drama. A few families have become good friends, and I've taught their kids to fish, properly, with permission and respect for the property. One unexpected development was that the County Parks Department approached me about possibly purchasing an easement for a small public fishing dock. Unlike the HOA's attempted land grab, they were professional and recognized my property rights from the start. We're in early discussions, but I might consider it if the terms are right. It would be nice to share the lake in a controlled, legal way that protects both my property rights and the natural environment. The security fence has worked out great. I ended up adding some native flowering vines along it, so it's actually pretty attractive now. Even the bright blue paint has grown on people. I've noticed several houses in Lake Vista Estates have started using similar accent colors. I guess they decided if they can't fight it, they might as well coordinate with it. The teenagers who vandalized my dock? Their parents finally made them come apologize after facing their own legal consequences. The kids ended up doing some work around my property as restitution, helping repair the dock they damaged, cleaning up trash along the shoreline, that sort of thing. It turned into a good learning experience for them about respecting private property and taking responsibility for their actions. I've installed a few more security cameras and lights around the property, but there haven't been any more trespassing incidents. The word is well and truly out that this is private property and violations will be prosecuted. The lawsuit money didn't just sit in my bank account either. I used it to make some improvements to the property that I'd been putting off. Fixed up the boathouse, added some habitat structures for the fish, and restored some of the shoreline that had been damaged by trespassers. The lake is healthier than ever. One of the funniest developments? Remember how Diana was so worried about property values? Turns out the homes with a view of my well-maintained private lake and attractive, yes, even with the blue paint, security fence are selling for more than the ones that don't. I guess there's something to be said for clear boundaries and good maintenance. I did have one last run-in with Diana about a month ago. I was in the hardware store when I heard that familiar voice saying, "Well, if it isn't the lake hoarder himself." I turned to see her standing there with a cart full of for sale signs. I just smiled and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect weather for a swim in my private lake." The look on her face was priceless as I walked away. Living well really is the best revenge. The whole experience has taught me a lot about standing up for what's right and not letting bullies push you around, even when they come wearing designer clothes and carrying HOA bylaws. Sometimes you have to fight for what's yours, but it's important to do it the right way, legally and with documentation. My grandfather's legacy is secure, and the lake remains the peaceful haven he always wanted it to be. The bright blue fence stands as a reminder that sometimes the best response to entitlement is setting firm boundaries, literally and figuratively. As for Lake Vista Estates, they're doing fine with their community pool, and I hear they're much more careful now about what they promise in their marketing materials. Amazing what a couple of lawsuits will do for truth in advertising. I still get questions from people asking if this is the famous lake they've heard about. The story has become something of a local legend, a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the importance of respecting property rights. I don't mind the attention. It helps remind people that the lake is private property. The best part? I've noticed several other property owners in the area standing up to unreasonable HOA demands. My case has become a sort of precedent, showing that you can fight back and win if you do things the right way. So here I am, enjoying my lake just like my family has for generations. The water's clean, the fish are biting, and best of all, it's peaceful. No entitled HOA members demanding access, no trespassers leaving trash on my shoreline. Just the quiet enjoyment of private property that's rightfully mine. And that bright blue fence? It's become my favorite feature of the property. Every time I look at it, I smile, knowing it represents more than just a boundary. It's a testament to standing your ground and protecting what's yours, even if you have to paint it a color that drives the HOAs crazy. The next one is entitled People Story. I, 26F, have been with my husband, 29M, let's call him Kyle, for 7 years, married for 4. Our relationship began as something too good to be true. He was amazing and made my life so much brighter, and we were truly best friends from the start. We moved in together after only 3 weeks of knowing each other and were inseparable. We were the couple people would say, "I just want something like you and Kyle. You two are so perfect for each other," and I agreed. We weren't each other's typical type and it felt like the universe brought us together. A year and a half later, he planned an elaborate proposal and we got engaged. It was magical. I couldn't have planned anything more special and romantic. We planned to get married a year and a half later. After a year we went on our bachelor/bachelorette trips, and we had our first fight after being together for 2.5 years. Since my bachelorette party was a month before his, he set some ground rules: call every night when you get back to the house and no hanging out at houses with men, for me, and women, for him. My bachelorette party went perfectly without even a temptation of breaking the rules, just a weekend hanging out on the beach with my girls. Skip to his bachelor party, he disappears for 6 hours. No calls, not texts. And then I see on one of his friends' social media posts that they are hanging out with a group of girls, and in the video Kyle is standing really close to a girl in a red bikini. They are talking and she is holding his phone in her hand. I tried calling and texting him and his friends for hours without a response. When I finally got in contact with him, he said his phone was inside charging and he was drunk and didn't think them hanging out with the girls would be an issue. I'm not stupid. I know he most likely cheated on me, but I chose to go forward with the wedding, which was now only 3 months away, partly because I loved him and knew I'd forgive him eventually, and my parents had already spent a lot of money on our wedding. Our wedding was beautiful and it was a perfect day. Shortly after, COVID hit and we were stuck not being able to live our normal life of going out and traveling often. 9 months into marriage I found out that he had created a fake social media account. I say fake because it was not his main profile, but he used his real name, Stupid, and was following several women. One was his ex. I made him pack his things and move out of our house. After being separated for 3 weeks, I found no evidence that he was actually contacting any of these women. He promised he'd never do something like that again. I forgave him and he moved back in. My family was also encouraging me to get back together with him. Our relationship was never better. It felt stronger and we were more connected. We bought our first house 1.5 years later and found out I was pregnant 4 months after we moved in. This is where everything begins to crumble. We did talk about me getting off of my birth control and decided it was the right time for us to start trying for a baby. But when I told him I was pregnant, he did not have the reaction I thought he would have. A big reason why I fell in love with this man is because I knew he'd be a great father. He's amazing with other kids and always talked about wanting a family of his own. He's a big kid at heart. When it came to my pregnancy, he didn't want to talk about anything baby-related and seemed to pretend the baby didn't exist. He started going out more without me and planned more guys' trips. I didn't mind. I'm more of a homebody and loved being at home, nesting and preparing for the baby to come. I thought he was feeling overwhelmed with the life change that would be here soon and just needed some time to let his hair down. I am not a jealous person. I was very confident that he wouldn't cheat on me because he was my best friend. I did everything for him and his friends would often talk about how lucky he was to have me as his partner. I also think I'm quite beautiful. He also began to treat me as more of a roommate during this crisis. We have had a few small arguments in the past of him taking advantage of me cooking and cleaning for him without him showing appreciation. He stopped taking me on dates or even asking me if I would want to go with him and his friends when they'd hang out. This was shocking to me because we had been inseparable for the last 5 years. I found out 3 weeks ago that he cheated on me while on one of his boys' trips last summer. He met a girl at a bar, bought her drinks, danced and made out, even took a picture together. They exchanged numbers and the next day she found out he was married and he blocked her on all of his social media and her phone number. This is how I found her. 2 weeks prior to me finding out about this girl, I found his anonymous online profile and saw that he had been sending explicit photos. I confronted him and he apologized, saying he was depressed. I had already planned to leave and move in with my mom for a while. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else that I was missing. So I checked his blocked accounts on social media and thought it was strange that there was a girl I didn't know on the list. I messaged her and she spilt the tea, even telling me that his friends were lying with him, telling her he was single. I confronted him and he said she was lying, of course. I left and moved in with my mom. Since then I have found out other information, not as damning, but activity that I wouldn't want my husband doing behind my back. I feel sick and devastated that he could do something like this to not only me but to our child. Did I mention I was at home alone for 8 days with our 5-month-old baby while he was on this trip where he made out with another girl? I feel like I sacrificed so much of my happiness for this man, trying to make his life as happy as possible, and he gave it all up for what? Like I said, I'm not stupid, so I know there are probably more instances of him cheating, but I don't want to know. I'm already done. Update. Not sure if anyone will care, but I've found myself thinking about this post a lot and wanted to give an update. I posted here around 9 months ago about leaving my husband after finding out he had been cheating on me. The first few months were hard. I tried to maintain a friendship with him for the sake of our son but just found myself getting hurt over and over again. So I distanced myself, and after a while I decided to get on a dating app, mostly to keep my mind off of him. I met someone and we connected instantly. I'll call him Matt. We texted and talked for a week before meeting in person. I didn't think it would be serious. I just wanted to get out of the house and have some fun. Turns out, he's an amazing man. I didn't even know people like him existed. He's sweet and thoughtful. He makes me laugh until I can't breathe. He's understanding, supportive, and actually listens when I talk to him. He's a parent too and loves his kids more than anything. I've now been dating Matt for 6 months and I don't think I've ever been this happy in my life. I look back at my marriage with Kyle in disbelief. How did I not notice how terrible he was for so long? Matt brings me flowers and surprises me with date nights and little gifts just to show he was thinking about me when we aren't together. Despite living an hour away, he brings food to me and my son when we are sick. If I'm having a bad day, he lets me talk his ear off and drops off my favorite sweets at my house. Matt is an amazing cook and we trade off nights in the kitchen. When it's my turn to cook, he spends quality time with the kids. The laughter in the house is almost constant. This is so far off from what my life was with Kyle. My ex only sees our son about 4 days a month and is constantly finding excuses to leave him with me or drop him off with his grandparents for the weekend. Being with a man who loves his kids and mine has really opened my eyes to what kind of a father Kyle is. Matt and I don't live together. He spends a lot of time at my house because my home is bigger. It accommodates all of us better than his house, and I have my son almost every day. Despite not living with me, he helps clean, does laundry and helps fix things around the house. He always comments that I don't let him do enough, but he does more for me than anyone ever has in my life. He picks me up and takes on so much that he doesn't have to, but he does it with a smile on his face. He never lets a day pass without telling me how much he loves and appreciates me. I have learned from my past and won't be moving in with anyone anytime soon. I was fooled once, and that won't happen again. Neither Matt or I want any more kids, so we are happy with the way our life is now. No pressure. Just living our lives happily alongside each other with our kids. To everyone out there who hopes your partner will change and grow up, they won't, and most likely never will. Find someone who makes you happy because they want to, not because you're begging them to. There are good people out there. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.